Well, good morning and welcome to Overdivest Nurseries. I'm David Wilson and I'm here in our trialing and testing area here on the nursery. This is where we plant out things so that we're able to see how they perform here in this region. That's the Mid-Atlantic and Northeastern states of the US. We grow plants all over the nursery here and then we send them out to our partnering garden centres. So it's very important that the varieties that you find at the garden centres are tested, trialled, and are tried and true performers for this region. And part of that is to look at some of these large leafed hydrangeas and see how they're doing right here under the normal kind of outdoor conditions that you're going to find in your garden. And the video today is a follow-up version of one that we posted a few weeks ago, where I took you through and showed you how the plants had emerged after the winter dormancy and how they were shaping up. And also in that video, I explain what remontancy is and why it's important in getting these large-leafed Mophead hydrangeas to flower reliably here in our region, especially in colder areas. And then I promised that we would come back and show you how they turned out. Well, today, as you can see, things have changed a good deal. Now, you'll remember how we looked at Endless Summer, Twist and Shout. We talked about how it had tremendous stem hardiness. Well, here it is now in full flower with its lovely Lacecap flowers. And as you see, all of these have come out now from old wood, but also it's producing some young remontant growth to keep the flower going through. Then we looked at the Tough Stuff series. And in particular, I was delighted to see the amount of flower bud that tiny Tough Stuff from Proven Winners was showing. And now, as you see, this plant has been in flower with its lovely, delicate, and as you see here, light blue flowers on our neutral pH soil, and these have been in flower now for about 2 weeks, and as you see, it's busy producing new growth from inside the crown, which is then going to follow through and give some remontant or rebloom later on during the year too. So these were two varieties that had exceptional stem and bud hardiness, came through the winter, and therefore produced lots of early flowers. A perfect way to start off the hydrangea season in our gardens. But of course, both of those varieties are Lacecap types, the ones that have the infertile florets around the outside, a term that's developed from the old Victorian lace caps that maids used to wear, and that's why they call them Lacecaps. Pretty, definitely. But for me, some of the most exciting ones are what we call Mopheads. These are the ones with rounded flower heads. And you'll remember that I was showing you how the exceptional stem hardiness of the variety Rock and Roll was displaying lots and lots of flower buds. Well, just look how this one turned out. It is literally covered with masses of these flower heads all over its fairly loose habit. And just like its parent, Twist and Shout, you'll see that here are the flower heads from the old wood, and then look here and you will see pushing up through from the base of the plant is the new remontant growth, with then follow on repeat, or we sometimes, well, not sometimes, we usually call remontant growth. So this is how the variety Rock and Roll turned out. Also, as you see on our neutral pH soil here, some flowers are pink and some are blue and some are lilac in between. Doesn't quite know what the color would be, whether it's pink or blue. And of course that's determined by the pH in the soil. And here, because it's neutral, we're getting actually 3 or maybe 4 or 5 different shades of color all on the same plant. Then you'll remember that I was impressed as to how well the original Endless Summer variety was doing. And here, as you see, no big surprises in this one, but also, as you see, rounded habit and lots of flowers on the old wood, and then pushing up new remontant growth to carry its flowering on through the rest of the season too. Now, if you've been watching any of our other videos or seen me out and about somewhere, you'll know that I love a good story. That probably goes back to my childhood when I was growing up in Ireland, and people would come to our house in the winter time on their ceilidh. My mother would be there making tea and buns and all lots of goodies, and I would be sat listening to the stories. People would be telling these stories with all sorts of intrigue and interest, and of course I was drinking it all in. Well, with this plant, Hydrangea Endless Summer, there's a fabulous story that I think deserves to be way better known about. And that is, believe it or not, this variety was discovered in the very cold climate, Zone 4 of St. Paul, Minnesota. You see, what's interesting is that a foreman from Bailey's nursery called Vern Black lived in the same street as a 5th grade teacher called Dennis Bostrom. And as he drove by the house, he could see that every year there was a hydrangea flowering. He watched it for 3 years, and after the snow went away and the winter went away and the spring started to grow and the summer conditions, there was this hydrangea flowering. So he went and took some cuttings and took them back to the nursery. He watched it for 3 years and seen that it was reliably flowering. And then, while they were doing trials and testing with it in the nursery, Dr. Michael Durr happened to visit there in 1998. Now, he of course comes from Georgia, where they grow lots of really nice hydrangeas. He was interested in the remontancy aspect of hydrangeas, and he recognized that in this plant it had to have really good remontancy. He was intrigued and interested in this plant. Nobody really knew how it happened to get there. Nobody knew its background, but he took some cuttings and then did some more trials with it in Georgia. And it's interesting that on the way back on the aeroplane from Bailey's nurseries, he scribbled down on a piece of paper the words Endless Summer, because with all of these lovely flowers and remontant growth and new flower buds that's coming through, that's why it's got all of these repeat flowers that keeps on coming through the summertime. And then the plant was introduced in 2004, and of course that led to the development of lots of other varieties now within the Endless Summer range. Now imagine if that foreman hadn't lived in the same street as the man who had it in his garden, if Dr. Durr hadn't visited the nursery and recognized and starting to research into remontancy in hydrangeas, if, lots of ifs, but all of them come together to produce this plant that today we're obviously, as you see, interested and happy to have plants like this growing and flowering in our garden. So there's a little background information for you on how we come to have this lovely variety, and from it several other varieties that have been bred and developed from its genetics too. I'm told that this is the world's top-selling hydrangea, and it's not a bit wonder when you see how it's producing all of these beautiful flowers here on the older growth, and then just like rock and roll, pushing up some young remontancy growth that then will keep it going through. So it truly is an endless summer variety. And within the range, there's some other beautiful varieties, one like Summer Crush, which is doing fantastically well here, and another one called Bloomstruck, which is very remontant and very reliable. So if you're struggling to get these to flower in your garden, definitely try some Bloomstruck. Chances are that's going to flower well for you. And then there's this one, which is Endless Summer Pop Star. Now this one is a smaller plant because it was planted later. It's a relatively new introduction, and you'll see already that it is covered with lots of flower buds. It's a Lacecap type 2, as you see, with producing some flowers in the center of each bloom, so that it does resemble somewhat of a Mophead. But as you see, the thing with this plant is that it is absolutely covered with lots of buds. A little later, yes, but as you see, this is also showing lots of potential. And since we're talking about Lacecaps, let me show you also this variety from Proven Winners, which of course is Tough Stuff. Now this, as you see, is a tight, compact, probably wider rather than tall plant, gets to about 2 to 3 foot high, and also now producing these very nice Lacecap flowers, which will either be red or pink or purple shades depending on the pH. It's got dark green foliage and sturdy stems that don't what we call cry. There are some varieties which are prone to wilting in the hot summer sun. They need the sun to ripen the flower buds, but sometimes when they're out in bright sunlight, it's just a characteristic of them to kind of wilt a little bit. That is perfectly natural. It's not that they need moisture or watering in the ground, though that's a good idea in the middle of the summer when things get dry. But we call it crying here on the nursery, and it's perfectly natural. If you have some of them that 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon suddenly look like they're drooping a little bit, and then you come out and look at them at 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening, you'll see that they're back up again. Well, this variety and also Summer Crush, we've noticed, are varieties that stand up very well to that heat conditions in the middle of a hot summer's day, when they're losing more moisture through their leaves than they're able to take up through their stems. Perfectly natural, nothing for you to be excessively worried about. But when you look at these Lacecap flowers on this one, you'll see that they have these nice little semi-double florets, I suppose you would call them, in the middle of each of the Lacecap flowers. Again, really good. It's got that mountain hydrangea blood in it, Hydrangea serrata. If you remember, I was telling you about how that's a species that grows at higher elevations and therefore brings with it sturdiness and good stem hardiness, and that's why, as you see, these varieties within the Tough Stuff range are producing lots of flowers now because of that species involvement. So that's Hydrangea Tough Stuff. Bred by Tim Wood at Spring Meadow Nurseries in 2005 and then introduced in 2009. And an interesting thing, if you look at this plant, you'll see that the flowers on this side of it are really now still just breaking. But look at them here on this upper side of the plant here, and that's because the early morning sun is coming in, warming up this side of the plant first. So we've actually got half of the plant which is about a week or so ahead of the other half. Perfectly natural as well. And then another plant that's in the Tough Stuff range is this variety here, which is Tough Stuff Aha. I never know whether I should pronounce this Tough Stuff Aha or Tough Stuff Aha. I suppose it's just aha. Anyway, when you look at it here, you'll see that this also has very pretty Lacecap flowers, but look at it, you'll see that it has these large florets around the outside, which are kind of like miniature water lilies. And what's interesting about this variety, which was bred at Tim Wood, also at Spring Meadow Nurseries, he crossed Tough Stuff with a Mophead variety, and that's where these large flowers and florets come from. So again, as you see, nice sturdy plant with old wood here producing early flowers, which again will either be a light pink or blue. But also, if you look at it here, you'll see that it's busy producing lots of remontant growth that's going to push up through and keep the flower going through too. So that's Hydrangea Tough Stuff Aha. Now, I also want to make a little mention about the position that we have them growing here in this bed. As you see, right now, they are exposed to all of the sunlight. They get sunlight in the morning, and that's important because it's the sun on them that helps them set the flower buds. They just love to have that. Ideally, somewhere about 6 hours sun, minimum of 4 hours. If you put them in deep shade, they probably won't flower so well. Now, on the other hand, we also have them behind these evergreens here, so that when the sun shifts around, this bed will fall into shade in the afternoon, protecting these big juicy flowers and stopping them from getting fried in the hot afternoon. So ideally, if you're looking for a place to grow hydrangeas in your garden, if you have a place like this that gets the morning sun but is then protected a little bit by shade in the afternoon, that is an ideal position for growing them. And as you see, these plants are really loving that sort of situation. The other thing that's important to mention too is this stuff, mulch. Put down a layer of 2 or 3 inches of mulch. That helps to conserve moisture in the ground. When it gets hot and dry in the middle of the summertime, certainly also think about giving them some watering. And just on the point of watering, I like to do it in the late afternoon or early evening. And if you get, say, a hose pipe or a watering can like this, get it right in at the crown of the plant and give it a good deep watering. Take your time, make sure that it gets right there into the center of the plant where it's going to do most good. If you want, you can always move the spout around a little bit so that you're getting more water out to the perimeter of the plant, but pouring it in at the base of the plant means that it's there where it's going to do most good. And with newly transplanted plants, it's very important to keep that going so that you water them regularly, because those plants are used to growing in the container. They then have to make the transition into the surrounding soil, and so you need to probably water them. Depending on the weather conditions and the type of soil you have, I would say probably about every other day. The plants will let you know when they start to look a little floppy. You will see that they're in need of some water. And of course, if you scratch the ground too, you'll be able to see what the soil moisture level looks like. So there you are. Give them a good drink late afternoon, early evening, and then they got all night to take it up and they're ready to grow the next morning. And remember how I was telling you how Endless Summer made a very good parent of other varieties? Well, take a look at this variety, which is part of the Proven Winners line. This is Let's Dance Rhythmic Blues. This is one that was raised by Tim Wood at Spring Meadow Nurseries in 2005. He knows that Endless Summer was the seed parent, but he's not sure where it was open pollination, so he's not sure what the pollen parent of it was. But if you look at it here, you'll see that this is a plant that has also got lots of really good things going for it. Gets to about 3 to 4 foot high. It's got good stem hardiness, and that's why it's producing these early flowers. And so these produce these nice big rounded heads, which will either be pink or blue depending on the pH. And because again we're on neutral here, they've got this kind of lilac lavender shade. And then look also, and you'll see that it's busy producing new remontant growth to keep the flowering going through. But as you see, carries lots and lots of these fabulous flowers. It has very good stem hardiness. It may be because it's protected somewhat by the evergreen trees here, but I noticed this spring that this really had quite a lot of good stem growth on it, and that means that now it's producing lots of lovely flower heads. In fact, I counted 20 flower heads on this little plant that's only just entering its 3rd season, and as well as having flowers now that are blue, different shades of lavender and pink, it also has plenty of young remontant growth pushing through too. So this is going to be shaping up and giving a good display through the rest of the summertime as well. And then there's this one, which I have to admit is probably one of my favorites. This is Hydrangea Let's Dance Can Do. Now this is a relatively new introduction. It was introduced in 2021. We produced a video here on this channel. You'll be able, if you want to dive in and get all the details about the plant. It was raised way back in 2012 and then selected in 2014 and went through an extensive trialing period before it was introduced. And as you see, it is literally covered with masses of these very pretty Lacecap flowers all over its rounded habit. Now in the video, if you watch it, you'll see that I had a little bit of fun talking about this plant because Tim and I are friendly, and I called him, because of the Let's Dance series, I called him Twinkle Toes Wood, because he really has done a remarkable job in taking that species that grows high up in the mountains, that serrata, and then introducing it into this breeding line that has now developed plants, as you see in this one, really good stem hardiness, but also lots of remontant young growth. Gets to about 3 to 4 foot high, and as you see, carries lots and lots of these very pretty pink or blue flowers depending on the soil conditions. And then, because it's busy producing lots of young remontant growth all over the plant, then keeps on flowering and flowering. And in our recognition of the variety here, we think it's one of the top performing varieties. So if there's one that you wanted to try out of the whole Let's Dance series, I would say take a look at this one, because I think you'll be pleased with how it turns out. But also I want to show you this variety, which is called Let's Dance Blue Jangles, because this is a really tight, compact and sturdy grower. It was also raised from that earlier version of the Let's Dance one I was talking about, Let's Dance Moonlight. But you'll see with this one that it's producing its nice big rounded flower heads on these strong stocky stems. Gets a little wider than tall, probably out to about 2 to 3 foot high. It does flower on the old wood and this new remontant wood, and as you see from this plant now, it's producing lots and lots of these lovely big fat flower heads that are going to be coming out and producing a really terrific show later on. And what's also interesting about this variety is that it responds particularly well to the treatment of how to get either blue or pink flowers on your hydrangeas. It of course depends on the amount of aluminum or aluminium, if you come from the UK, that's in the soil. That's the stuff that determines whether you get blue or purple shades on these varieties. And this one is particularly responsive. So if you're somebody who likes to have your hydrangeas on the blue side, this might be one that you would think about growing. I find here in our situation not so much of the old wood surviving on the stems, but really strong remontancy, and that's why this is probably going to be a later developer, but very, very good display nevertheless. This is Hydrangea Let's Dance Blue Jangles from Proven Winners. And then, if you've been watching the other video, you'll remember seeing me clip away the old flower heads from a variety that's here on the end of the bed. This is Hydrangea Double Down from Star Roses and Plants. You'll remember I went in and snipped off all of the old flower heads, and on the plant was a lot of strong buds pushing up from the center of the crown. Well, look what it's done. Look how this has turned into producing these magnificent big double flower dome shaped plant here that, as you see, produces flowers all over its rounded habit. It may not, like blue Jangles, be showing a lot of stem hardiness, but man, does this really show good remontancy. So here's a plant that, when it gets killed back to the ground, will sprout from underneath and then come out and show off all of these gorgeous big flowers, which of course will be pink when they're on soil conditions here around neutral, but whenever you treat them, or if you've got acid soil, will be a beautiful shade of blue too. And incidentally, if you want to find out more about how you can go about changing the color on your hydrangeas, check out another video that we have also here on this channel. In there you'll be able to see how I go about changing the colors in my garden, so there might be a few extra tips for you there as well. So there you are. There's a little summary of what we're seeing now a little bit later on in the season. I think you can see that out of this selection of hydrangeas, there's really some very, very good performers, ones that will give you good stem hardiness and early flowers, and then others that will be able to come through even if they get killed back to the ground and grow out and flower in the same year. So I hope that's interesting, I hope it helps, and I hope you'll be able to grow some absolutely beautiful and really gorgeous hydrangeas in your garden. This is David Wilson. Enjoy your gardening. It's good for us, and it's good for our environment too.